Okay, so in this video, we are going to talk about the lesson 6 summary, which was the different forms of equations. And again, we're going to ask that if you haven't read that on your own, hit pause. You can either read it in your workbook or you can read it on the screen, but you should read it on your own before you hear our discussion. Okay, so Ms. Bush, what stood out to you in this summary?
So I think the most important part about lesson 6 is putting together a lot of the information we've been talking about and looking at the two forms for a polynomial, and that each of the forms is useful in its own way. Like you can't have one without the other. You need them both. Like, so this one focuses on standard form here, where if you're in standard form, which is this one, right, that it's easy to see what the constant term is, which is the last term, so negative 4.5, which is also the vertical intercept, okay? So if it's constant, it's not necessarily always the last term, okay? But the vertical intercept or the y-intercept is that constant term. And then also you can see what the leading term is and tell what the degree is very easily because it's always that exponent on the leading term, okay? So this one would have degree 5 and a constant term of negative 4.5.
Yeah, and I also wanted to kind of add into that was like the constant term, like you mentioned briefly, like it's not always necessarily the very last term, but it's the term without a variable. And that when we are writing them in standard form, they should start with the highest exponent and then like decrease by that number, like go down from there so that you are technically supposed to end with the constant. Yeah, but like factored form, when I'm looking at factored form, it also gives me a ton of information. So like I like factored form because I can see right here that I know I'm going to have an x-intercept at 1, at -2, at 3, and at -3. Like I can see like how many times it's going to cross that x-axis and kind of maybe give me a prediction of a shape of what the graph might look like. Maybe. We might not be there yet, but that's okay. But like you said, like both forms give us different information, but we could use, right? Like we could use the factored form to get to the standard form if we multiply it out. If we're given the factored form, we could get that degree and that constant still.
Yeah, but multiplying all that out would be a complete nightmare. So
like you could
this one in particular.
Yeah, I mean, this one in particular, you could cheat it, right? So like if you wanted to, if you didn't want to take the time to multiply out every single little thing, like if you only wanted to know the constant, like couldn't I just multiply the 1 to -3, 3, and the 0.25, the 1/4, and like that would give me the constant value, right?
That's true. And you could also predict what the degree would be by counting how many x's you had in your problem. 2 of them here, be careful because this binomial is squared, and then one more, so 3, 4, and 5, and then you could predict that 5 without actually having to multiply it through.
Yeah.
But if I was looking at the standard form and I needed the zeros or the x-intercepts, that's really, really difficult to do. Like you cannot predict what those are. So you'd have to go to Desmos and graph it to see what those x-intercepts are. We really don't have any other way, especially with one as big as this one, to predict what those zeros are going to be from the standard form. Like, even though standard form is good for some things, it's not good for all things, and neither is the factored form. Like you need them both.
No, you're right. You do need them both. I think I'm just more drawn to the factored form because I do have that cheat of like I could kind of finagle some things and to get to the standard form, even though it might be a pain in the butt.
But still, like whenever you look at the definition of a polynomial, it looks like a standard form, right? Standard form has the exponents.
Yeah.
And it makes it look more like it talks about the sum of terms. And so like when you're thinking about the definition of a polynomial, it doesn't even look like one at the beginning, like the factored form, even though it is.
Yeah, it is, right? It's just
interesting
that before we get to that standard form. So they do have different functions. And I also noticed here that they talk about the vertical intercept, like you highlighted, as opposed to the y-intercept. So I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, I guess we're just going to have to use both terms.
Yeah, like I know in my experience, it's always been referred to as like the x-intercept and the y-intercept. And this book kind of seems to be transitioning us into horizontal and vertical intercepts. So
same, but we're old.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
At least I am.
I'm getting there. All right. Well, do we feel like there's anything else that we needed to really highlight here?
No, I think we're good.
I think so too.
Hope this was helpful.